Welcome in. Thanks so much for joining me. So, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about one of the probably most common questions I receive from either mentees I'm working with one to one, or students in classes, retreats, or just some of you who reach out to me online. And this question just often revolves around, it can be asked in different ways, but it often revolves around um, how do I know if I'm getting the correct results from my practice? Basically, am I doing it right? And I think I've been asked this kind of question in many different ways, and of course, I ask it myself as well from time to time. So it's not wrong to ask it, right? But I think there are some useful things to think about in this area for framing, I guess, what we're looking for, right? And, even what we mean by result, which sometimes even the seeking of can sort of, I don't know how you say it, block our practice itself. So with that said, what I usually say is kind of more of, something for you to reflect on if you're having this kind of question, or you've had it before, is what does it mean to work? Like, what does it mean that our practice is working? I guess we could also ask the reverse question. What does it mean that our practice isn't working? And sometimes what we can pull out here is a lot of assumptions of what our motivation is, right? So in lineage-based Buddhism, we often work with intention or motivation as its own practice. And that motivation, it's kind of like taught to us, but it's not saying, oh, you gotta like do what we say. It's more saying like, here's a really helpful way to motivate for your meditation. And then now you can explore that. So as an example, we often use the motivation to pursue awakening or enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. We call this aspirational bodhicitta in Mahayana Buddhism. And so this itself is a huge territory. It's a whole set of practices for widening that motivation, for coming into contact with it more conceptually, emotionally, as well as eventually starting to affect our conduct or behavior. But mainly, it really has to do with attuning the mind to what we're trying to get out of this whole thing, right? And what I found is it is in the beginning, it's quite subtle and it doesn't seem like a lot. But the way we set our motivation is a lot like the rudder of a ship. This is what an analogy one of my teachers uses. It's like the rudder of a ship that's moving very slowly. Like you can think of a big tanker, and the rudder is what sets the direction, right? And so the difference between a rudder like this versus like this is very subtle, but over many miles, it's not subtle at all, right? You can be in a totally different continent. So this is kind of how we think of it. And that's why it's so important to reflect on motivation, deepen it, have practices to, deepen it, as well as to treat it as its own practice, essentially. So just before I jump in, just one quick caveat, which is that, I'm not also here to tell you, right and wrong, or that, you have the wrong motivation, or that your practice isn't working, right? There's many different goals for meditation. Not all goals align with the goals of Dharma or a Buddhist path, right? Like some people just want to calm down a little bit. That's fine. So, obviously that it's a little easier to tell if our practice is working. We're either calmer or not, right? In that sense. But I'm going to go into something a little bit deeper here, based on a conversation I had with a one-to-one mentee the other day, because it's kind of a subtle point, but I've noticed for me, it really changes. It changes a lot. It changes not only how I practice, but it kind of changes like where I'm looking in practice, what I'm working with. And what this has to do with is primarily like in most meditation practices in the Buddhist tradition, they require a development of and like a strengthening of this quality of mind we call awareness. Sometimes in other styles of secular meditation, they call it mindfulness. Either way, it's referring to a very similar thing. This quality of mind that can essentially know its knowing, that can bear witness to experiences of mind and body, sense perceptions, thoughts, etc. And we connect with that in meditation, and we cultivate it, we grow it, we feed it, right? And that's across the board, whether we're doing more of a secular mindfulness practice or Buddhist meditation practice, right? But why we're doing that can change essentially how it works, right? So of course, when we become more aware, there is the potential for less stress. I would also argue like there's the potential for more stress because we're also seeing more of our mind and emotions. So that can happen to people. And some people think they're doing it wrong at that point. I would argue there's a potential you're doing it right. It's just then we need practices for being able to be with stress in a more compassionate and open way. Okay? But anyways, I'm getting a little off track. So the idea here is, from a Buddhist perspective, our awareness practice, when we're cultivating awareness, when we're strengthening it, the idea is that eventually we can export that off of the meditation cushion, right? As one of my friends, Sharon Salzberg, well-known meditation teacher, says, it's sort of like we're not meditating to get good at meditation, right? So what that implies is we're meditating to actually be able to export it from our formal practice into life, have more awareness of our body, speech, mind, have a little bit, in the beginning, maybe a little bit more of a gap between a reaction and response, where we can respond to situations, not from our habits and maybe we could say sort of like, aggression or afflictive behaviors, things that aren't so skillful. So initially that's a huge benefit, right? It can benefit our relationships, our work, all kinds of things. And of course that makes us a more peaceful person because others are more at peace around us. So we're going to also be more at peace. But anyways, as we move deeper, we also are starting to see more and more layers of the mind. And from the Buddhist perspective, this is the point. Awareness is, cultivating awareness in meditation. It is so we can see more of how the mind is working, how our clinging, aggression, and misperception is working. And when we do that, we start to knock on the door of freedom. We start to, via understanding directly in meditation through awareness, we start to untangle things, right? And of course, we have practices to directly untangle, but sometimes just bearing witness can be, just a huge eye-opener where we start to see the inner workings of the inner world, right? As opposed to just acting from them. So this is a big, big difference. And so this is, one of the ways I define from let's say a deeper perspective, definitely influenced from Buddhism, of whether our practice is working or not. Are we seeing more of the ways we become bound? Are we seeing more of our dissatisfaction and stress? And are we understanding it more? Definitely, it's important also understanding how to, unhook, how to untangle ourselves from that. Of course, that's really important. I would say here, some people get caught here where they might think I'm saying or someone else is saying, it just means we sort of like see our suffering and like wallow in it. No, that's not very useful. I would say that's not useful at all, actually. But if we don't see it and we don't see the layers and depth to it, we're not going to understand it. And therefore, there's very little hope in actually untangling it. So the untangling part is what most people are looking for, right? Like most people would have as, view their practice as successful if, their emotions are more chill, they have less thoughts, all of that. I actually don't use that as a definition personally. What I use as a definition is our compassion growing and is our wisdom growing, right? And compassion here means is our ability for our heart to break open towards our own stress and suffering, is that growing? And of course, are we also able to see others more? Is our compassion growing for them? And the wisdom aspect I already talked about a little bit. Are we seeing more clearly where we're bound and how we get tangled? And are we starting to experience that has, the solidity of that is it's definitely questionable, right? There's a lot more fluidity actually to how reality is functioning. And so, of course, we have, direct Buddhist practices within shamatha and vipassana to do this. But, just putting it more plainly and kind of, without too much jargon, to me, that's what it comes down to. Are we seeing more of where we're bound? Are we seeing the inner workings of that? And then, how do you say it? Are we allowing untangling to happen? Are we seeing more clearly where we're getting stuck and how we can get unstuck? Of course, the path from being stuck to unstuck, that's the hardest part, I mean, it really is, right? So we have to have a lot of patience, a lot of kindness, a lot of compassion. This is why I sort of usually recommend compassion first, because that gives us the patience and the space to bear witness when we see more of life and mind and emotions and all of that. So contrary to popular belief, meditation is not like making, like cleaning the mess or avoiding the mess or running from it. It kind of is like going deeper into it. So you could see there, we need to be heavily resourced to do that. That's why I think for beginners, a lot of like groundedness in the body, using somatic meditation practices, developing a stable awareness, on the cushion really, really helps. I mean, again, it's not something I invented. It's in the, many, many Buddhist texts and sutras, right? They're like creating a stability of mind, which we often call settling the mind. The purpose is not to settle the mind. The purpose is to settle the mind so we can do all this work of letting in the monsters and working with the monsters, right? And it doesn't phase us, right? So, that's about it. I mean, I always have a lot to say on this topic. I really enjoy it. It always comes out slightly differently. Came out a little differently on my one-to-one mentoring call. But either way, I hope this makes sense. And if you're enjoying this and if it's helpful and you want me to say more about it, just let me know. So yeah, with that said, feel free to leave any comments here if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to the podcast, feel free to reach out at scotttusa.com. I always like hearing from you, and let me know kind of what this is sparking for you. Does this make sense? Is it sort of, is it clicking? Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.